The great refectory of the Nexus Academy on Xylos was a testament to cooperative chaos. A vast, domed chamber with a ceiling of smart crystal, it mimicked the sky of the dominant species at any given table, a courtesy that often resulted in a patchwork of swirling nebulae, blazing twin suns, and the soft, unassuming blue of a planet called Earth. The air itself was a carefully modulated compromise, a blend of gases and humidity levels that was breathable for the 93 species enrolled, though some still required personal environment filters. The low hum of 100 different conversations in 1,000 different frequencies, from the subsonic rumbles of the Grawl to the chittering clicks of the Cathar, created a soundscape that was either a vibrant symphony or a throbbing headache, depending on the day. Zoral, a Kylith whose slender, elegant form was designed for the open plains of their homeworld, found it mostly overwhelming. They picked at their nutrient paste, a bland, beige substance fortified for Kylithian biology, and tried to focus on their friends. Their large, liquid dark eyes, which could spot a predator from a kilometer away under the soft light of Kylos's 3 moons, were fixed on the human, Liam. Liam was an anomaly. Physically, he was unremarkable compared to the other species. He lacked the intimidating musculature of Boar, the Grawl who sat opposite them, or the sleek, coiled potential of Kalen, the Vex crouched on a low stool to Liam's right. He was soft, fleshy, and possessed a startling lack of natural armor or weaponry. Yet, he moved with an unnerving economy of motion, a quiet confidence that seemed entirely at odds with his biological vulnerability. It was his listening that bothered Zoral the most. When Boar spoke, his voice a deep, resonant vibration that made the cutlery tremble, Liam would listen with his full attention, nodding and smiling. When Kalen's sibilant voice cut through the din, he'd meet her gaze. But it was the moments in between, the moments of ambient noise that set Zoral's delicate, feathery crest on edge. Liam would go still. Utterly, unnaturally still. His smile would fade not into a frown but into a blank, neutral mask. His eyes, a strange and shifting mix of blue and green, would lose their focus on his companions and seem to unfocus on everything. His head would tilt, a barely perceptible cant of 1 or 2 degrees. Zoral, whose entire evolutionary history was predicated on interpreting the subtle signs of impending danger, found this behavior profoundly disturbing. It wasn't the inattentiveness of a bored student. It was the focused stillness of something waiting, something listening for a snapped twig in a silent forest. Liam, Zoral said, their own voice a series of soft, melodic chirps translated by the universal implant behind their ear. Are you feeling unwell? You seem to drift away from the conversation. Liam blinked and the amiable, easygoing human was back. He offered a quick, self-deprecating smile. Sorry, Zoral, just a lot on my mind. Midterms are a beast, you know. Boar, the Grawl, let out a low chuckle. His species communicated as much through scent and pheromones as sound, and his scent now was one of placid amusement. The human mind is a busy place, full of sharp corners and loud noises, my sire told me. But Zoral wasn't satisfied. They had seen this behavior before, in holovids of Earth predators. The way a pack of wolves would go silent and still, testing the wind. The way a crocodile could lie so motionless it was mistaken for a log. Later, when Liam had left to check his scores on a terminal across the hall, Zoral leaned closer to Kalen. The Vex, with her smoky gray fur, tufted ears, and vertically slitted pupils, was herself a predator. Her people were lone hunters on the mesas of Vexar, respected and feared for their speed and cunning. Did you notice it? Zoral chirped quietly. The way he listens to the silence. Kalen's ears twitched, swiveling independently to track the complex soundscape of the refectory. I have noticed, she hissed, her translator rendering the sound into smooth, baritone standard. It is not a common trait among the prey-evolved species. Your people, Zoral, are always aware, but you are listening for specific threats. You are listening for the thing that will kill you. The human is listening to everything at once. Does it mean? Zoral asked, their crest fluffing in anxiety. Kalen's yellow eyes narrowed, fixed on Liam's back as he stood at the terminal. He wasn't just looking at the screen. His head was up, his gaze sweeping the room in a slow, steady arc. He wasn't sightseeing. It was systematic. A sweep, A cold dread, an instinctual feeling Kaelin hadn't experienced since she was a kit facing down a territorial elder, prickled beneath her fur. Her own predatory senses, honed over generations to track the weak and the unwary, were screaming at her. But they weren't screaming prey. They were screaming something far more confusing. "He is not listening," Kaelin whispered, her voice tight. "He is processing, he is building a map. Sound, movement, numbers, density. He is running a constant, passive threat assessment of the entire room." Zoral's crest flattened against their skull. "A threat assessment, but there are no threats here. This is the Nexus Academy. It is the safest place on this moon." "Safest is a relative term," Kaelin countered, her gaze unwavering. "For a prey animal, safety is the absence of predators. For a predator, safety is the absence of competition. For him," she paused, trying to find the right words, the concept so alien it was difficult to articulate. "For him, safety is a state that must be actively and constantly maintained. He is not assuming safety. He is assuming threat, and he is calculating the variables needed to overcome it at all times." "But why?" Zoral was bewildered. "Humans are not a dominant predator species. The archives say they are omnivores, persistence hunters, yes, but fragile. They have no natural claws, no venom, no armor. They are clever tool users, but biologically they are weak." Kaelin's lips peeled back from her sharp teeth in a silent, humorless snarl. It wasn't a gesture of aggression, but of dawning, horrified realization. "That is why, Zoral, that is precisely why. My species is fast, Boar's is strong, yours is perceptive. We have tools built into our flesh. A Vex can outrun or outfight most threats. A Grawl can smash them. A Kylith can see them coming and flee. We are specialists. What do you do when you have no speed, no strength, no innate defense?" Zoral had no answer. "You become the ultimate generalist," Kaelin breathed, her voice dropping so low it was almost a subvocalization. "You do not rely on your body. You rely on your mind, not for complex equations or star charts. You turn your entire consciousness into a weapon. You think your way out of any trap. You strategize your way to the top of any food chain. You learn to see everything not as a world to live in, but as a problem to be solved, a battlefield to be controlled." He is not assessing threats to him. He is assessing all threats. All weaknesses, all opportunities. Liam turned from the terminal and started walking back, a relaxed smile on his face. "Good news, I passed astrodynamics," he announced as he approached. Zoral and Kaelin were silent. Boar rumbled a congratulations, oblivious. Liam slid back into his seat, his smile faltering as he saw the looks on their faces. "Hey, what's wrong? You two look like you've seen a ghost." Zoral couldn't speak, their throat constrictor muscles tight with a primal fear they hadn't felt since childhood. It was Kaelin who spoke, her voice dangerously soft. "Liam, we were discussing your observational habits." Liam's brow furrowed. "My what? You mean the listening thing? Zoral, I told you it's nothing. Just a habit." "It is not nothing," Kaelin insisted, leaning forward. Her predator instincts were at war with her academic conditioning. "I am a hunter, human. My mind is built to notice things others do not. You are not just listening. You are mapping, profiling, every being in this room. Tell me I am wrong." Liam stared at her for a long moment. The amiable mask dropped away, replaced by that unnerving, neutral calm. His eyes seemed to sharpen to truly see her for the first time. He wasn't looking at a friend. He was looking at a Vex, female, young adult. Approximate weight 60 kilograms. Excellent reflexes, likely fast in a straight line. Primary weapons are claws and teeth. Pack hunter or solitary? Solitary. More predictable. The assessment took less than a second. It was so automatic he barely noticed he was doing it. He let out a slow breath, the sound barely audible. He looked from Kaelin's tense form to Zoral's terrified stillness. He saw Boar's confused, questioning gaze. He had made a mistake. He had let the mask slip. He had assumed his normal was their normal. "You're not wrong," he said, his voice quiet. The casual admission landed in the center of the table with the force of a physical blow. Zoral made a tiny, distressed sound. "Why?" Kaelin demanded. Liam shrugged, a gesture so casual it was utterly terrifying. "Habit, like I said. Force of habit. I'm always tracking the exits." He gestured with his chin. "There are the two main doors, plus a service corridor behind the nutrient vats. The Grawl at table 7 is the biggest potential obstacle if there's a panic. He'd block the north exit, but he's slow. You, he nodded at Kalen, are the fastest person in here. You'd be the first one out, or the first one to me if you chose. He took a sip of his water. The security drones are on a 90-second patrol sweep, so there's a 12-second window at the far end of their arc. The transparent ceiling is quad-paned synth steel. You'd need a sustained plasma charge to get through it. The weakest point in this room is the floor. The gravity plates are shielded, but the conduits underneath are accessible through that maintenance hatch near the west wall. If you could overload the power relay, you could disable the grav plates, the doors, and the drones all at once. He finished and looked at their faces. The blood had drained from Zoral's crest, leaving it a pale, sickly lilac. Boar was staring at him, his mouth slightly agape, a low, confused rumble emanating from his chest. Kalen was frozen, her fur bristling. She looked like a wild animal that had just stumbled upon something so far beyond its experience that its only possible responses were fight, flight, or total system shutdown. She was choosing shutdown. Liam sighed, a deep, weary sound. He had just wanted to get a degree in xenolinguistics. He had just wanted a quiet life. It's not aggressive, he tried to explain, but the words felt hollow even to him. It's just being aware. On Earth, if you're not aware of your surroundings, you can get hurt, or worse. It's just how we're wired. Wired? Zoral finally whispered, the translator barely catching the tremor in their voice. You are wired to see a room full of fellow students of friends as a tactical problem. You have assessed our vulnerabilities. You have assessed my vulnerabilities. The thought was so violating, so deeply antithetical to the Kylithian ideal of communal trust, that Zoral felt a wave of nausea. Liam looked at Zoral, at their fragile frame and wide, terrified eyes. He had, of course, Kylith, prey species, excellent long-range vision, poor close-quarters defense, light bone structure, susceptible to blunt force trauma, flight-based instinct. In a crisis would likely freeze or flee erratically, becoming a liability to group movement. He couldn't lie. Yes, he said softly, but not to exploit them, to protect us. If something happened, I'd know how to get you out. I'd know who the threats were and who the assets were. It's a defensive system. Kalen shook her head slowly, her yellow eyes gleaming with a terrible, new understanding. A defensive system born from an environment so dangerous that you must treat everyone and everything as a potential threat. A system that makes you the most dangerous thing in any room you enter. You are not a sheep pretending to be a wolf, human. You are a wolf who has spent its entire life perfecting the art of pretending to be a sheep. The silence that followed was heavier and more profound than any sound in the refectory. The murmur of the academy faded away, replaced by the deafening roar of a chasm that had just opened between them. Liam, the friendly, unassuming human exchange student, was gone. In his place sat something ancient and unsettling, a creature whose mind was a fortress, whose gaze was a scan, and whose every casual observation was a calculation for survival. The galaxy had just met humanity, and it was terrified. The news did not spread like wildfire. It moved like a toxin, seeping through the porous social structures of the Nexus Academy. It wasn't an official report filed with Coordinator Olin, the crystalline shaper who ran the institution with unnerving placidity. It was a murmur, a whisper exchanged in hushed tones in atmospheric pods and study carols. A Vex had seen it. A Kylith had confirmed it. The human Liam was not what he seemed. The reactions were as varied as the species themselves. For prey-evolved races like the Kylith, the Jessoids, and the fluttering, insectoid Pithran, it was a source of pure, unadulterated terror. They began giving Liam a wide berth in the corridors. If he sat at a table in the library, it would slowly empty. They couldn't articulate the fear properly. He hadn't threatened anyone. He hadn't been aggressive. But his very nature, this constant, cold analysis, was a violation. It was like discovering that the air you breathed was sentient and silently judging the strength of your lungs. Trust, for them, was a passive state, the assumption of non-aggression. Liam's mind operated on the opposite principle, the assumption of potential aggression, which required constant vigilance. To them, this was indistinguishable from malice. Predator-evolved species like the Vex, the hulking, Ursine Clarg, and the serpentine Naga had a different reaction. It was not fear, but a deep, instinctual wariness. It was respect, but the kind of respect one gives to a dormant volcano. Kaelin became the unwilling expert, cornered by others of her kind. "It is his eyes," she explained to a group of Vex in their shared high-gravity habitat, the words coming out in their natural, sibilant tongue. "When he looks at you, he is not seeing a person. He is seeing a set of capabilities. He weighs you. He measures you. He disassembles you into your component parts, speed, strength, reach, weakness, and files the data away. He does this to everyone, all the time, without thinking." A warrior's assessment, a large male Vex rumbled, his fur a brindled pattern of black and gold. "Our ancestors did this before a hunt." "No," Kaelin corrected him sharply. "Our ancestors did this to their prey. Or to a rival, it is a focused, targeted state. He does it to everything. The chair he sits in. The door he walks through. His friends, it is not the mindset of a hunter. It is the mindset of a survivor so profoundly shaped by a hostile world that hostility is the baseline assumption. He is a walking contingency plan." Most bizarre reactions came from the species that had evolved without terrestrial predator-prey dynamics. The silicon-based shapers like Coordinator Olin were merely curious. The concept was so alien it was simply a fascinating new data point. The communal gelatinous ooze, which occupied a corner of the refectory in a large, temperature-controlled vat, seemed to quiver with mild confusion when Liam passed, its collective consciousness unable to parse an individual who contained such a complex internal fortress. For Liam, the change was isolating. The smiles he received were now strained, the greetings hesitant. His friends were the worst. Bor, the gentle Grawl, was simply confused and hurt. He couldn't understand the fear. "But Liam is our friend," he would rumble, his scent a mix of bewilderment and loyalty. "Friends do not calculate how to defeat each other." Yet even he grew hesitant, his movements around Liam becoming more guarded, as if he were afraid of being judged weak. Kaelin avoided him, but he would catch her watching him from a distance. Her yellow eyes narrowed not with anger but with intense, analytical focus. She was trying to understand him now, using her own predator's mind to deconstruct his. It was a strange, silent duel of observation. Zorl was the most affected. They avoided him completely for 3 full rotations. Liam would see them in a corridor, and they would immediately duck into a different passageway, their feathery crests slicked back with anxiety. The loss of their friendship was a physical ache in Liam's chest, a pain that his internal threat matrix had no defense against. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He tracked Zorl's schedule, an easy, unconscious act of data retention, and knew they spent their 3rd cycle in the Arboretum, a massive biodome that replicated the misty, low-light forests of Kylos. He found them standing by a stream, watching bioluminescent fish drift through the water. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and alien moss. "Zorl," he said softly. Zorl flinched violently, whirling around. Their body language screamed flight. Their crest was flat, their posture low to the ground. "Please," Liam said, holding up his hands in a gesture he hoped was universally placating. "Don't run, just talk to me." "Talk," Zorl's translated voice was thin and brittle. "What is there to say? You see me and you see a collection of weaknesses. You see a being with light bone structure and a susceptibility to blunt force trauma." Liam's face fell. He had known his words would be repeated. "I do see that," he admitted, his voice raw with honesty. "It's automatic, I can't turn it off, but that's not all I see my friend. I see someone who is brilliant with xenobotany and who can explain the intricacies of Kylithian poetry so that even a blockhead like me can understand it. I see someone who laughed so hard they snorted nutrient, paced out their breathing slits when Bor tried to program the food synthesizer to make a Grolian mud cake." He took a hesitant step forward. "The analysis, it's a layer, it's a background process, it's not the main program. The main program is me, Liam, your friend." Zorl's posture relaxed fractionally. "Why, Liam, why are you like this? The archives paint Earth as a paradise. A blue jewel. They speak of your art, your music, your philosophies. They don't speak of this." Liam found a smooth, moss-covered rock and sat down, gesturing for Zorl to do the same. Hesitantly, they perched on a nearby root. "The archives show you the highlight reel," Liam began, his gaze distant, as if looking through the dome at a sky millions of light-years away. "Earth is beautiful. We do have art and music. But we also have Earth. We are a death world, not in the way the galaxy defines it with acid rain or megafauna. It's more subtle. He leaned forward, trying to find the words. Our entire history is one of competition. We competed with the climate. We competed with predators that were faster and stronger than us. We competed with disease. And most of all, we competed with each other. For resources, for land, for ideas, for safety. Our paradise is sectioned off by invisible lines, and crossing them without permission has consequences. Our cities are filled with millions of our own kind, and in any crowd, there is a statistical probability of running into someone who wishes you harm for reasons you can't even comprehend. We live in a state of perpetual low-grade conflict. He looked at his hands, soft, uncalloused now, but he remembered them differently. I wasn't a soldier, I was a paramedic, an emergency responder in one of the biggest megacities back home. My job was to walk into chaos, into the aftermath of violence, accidents, disasters. My first day, my mentor told me the two most important rules. 1. The scene is never safe. 2. Your primary responsibility is your own safety, because if you go down, you can't help anyone else. Zoral's large eyes were wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. So you learn, Liam continued, his voice becoming flat and methodical, the paramedic's tone. You learn to scan a crowd for the person whose hands are hidden or whose movements are just a little too twitchy. You learn to spot the unstable part of a collapsed building. You learn to clock every exit the moment you enter a room. You learn to distinguish the sound of a backfiring vehicle from the sound of a gunshot. You learn that the person screaming for help might be a victim, or they might be bait. You learn that trust is a luxury you can only afford after you've verified the data. My profiling, he said, using Kalen's word, isn't about wanting to hurt anyone. It saved my life a dozen times. It let me save other people's lives because I was the one who stayed calm, the one who had already thought through the 5 worst things that could happen and had a plan for 3 of them. He looked up at Zoral, his eyes pleading. I'm not in that life anymore, I know that. Logically, I know the Nexus Academy is safe, but the software is still running. It's been running my whole life. I don't know how to shut it down. And part of me is terrified that if I ever did, I wouldn't be me anymore. I'd be defenseless. Zoral was silent for a long time, their feathery crest slowly, tentatively beginning to rise back to its normal position. They were looking at Liam not as a monster, but as a survivor of a trauma they could barely imagine. An entire species of survivors, shaped by a world that was both a garden and a battlefield. The first Kylithians, Zoral said softly, built our nests high in the crystal spires of our world to escape the ground stalkers. We learned to live in the sky, it became our nature. We never lost the instinct to look down, to check for shadows on the plains below. Liam nodded. And we never climbed into the spires, we stayed on the ground. And we learned to kill the stalkers. A fragile understanding began to form in the quiet of the Arboretum. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't a return to the naive friendship they had before. It was something new, something more complex and far more real. Zoral was a creature who had evolved to escape danger. Liam was a creature who had evolved to dismantle it. They were 2 different answers to the same eternal question of survival. I do not think I can ever be comfortable with it, Zoral admitted honestly. To know that a part of your mind is always watching, always calculating, it feels like a violation of the self. No, Liam said, and I'm sorry, I never wanted to make you feel that way. But, Zoral continued, taking a hesitant step closer, I think I am beginning to understand why. It is not malice, it is a scar. Liam looked at his friend, and for the first time in a long time he consciously tried to relax his internal sentinels. He pushed down the part of his brain that was noting the time, the position of the other students in the dome, the hum of the atmospheric regulators. He just looked at Zoral, his friend, and offered a small, genuine, unguarded smile. The scar was still there, but perhaps with time it didn't have to be a wall between them. Perhaps it could be a bridge. The ripples from Liam's revelation did not dissipate. They coalesced into a formal inquiry. Coordinator Olin, whose crystalline form refracted the light of the Arboretum into 1,000 tiny rainbows, summoned them. It was not a disciplinary hearing, but an academic one. The location itself was telling. Not Olin's austere office, but a neutral, circular chamber with soft lighting and no discernible exits, a design intended to promote a feeling of calm security. For Liam, it was a tactical nightmare. He sat at the circular table beside Zorl, whose presence was a small comfort. Kaelin was there, her posture rigid, her gaze sharp and assessing. Bor the Grawl sat opposite, his large form filling the chair, his scent one of nervous loyalty. And there were others, a representative of the insectoid Pithran, its multifaceted eyes taking in everything at once. A Clarg whose heavy, furred presence radiated a quiet authority, and a silent, floating sphere that was a delegate from the non-corporeal meditations of Cygnus X1. Coordinator Olin did not speak, but let their thoughts resonate directly in the minds of those present. A calm, dispassionate wave of inquiry. The purpose of this gathering is not to assign blame, but to achieve understanding. A new variable has been introduced into the social ecosystem of this academy. We must analyze it. Student Liam of Earth. Liam felt the collective focus of the room settle on him. It was a weight far heavier than any gravity plating. It has been brought to our attention, Olin continued, that your cognitive processes differ significantly from the galactic median. Specifically, your species appears to engage in constant, subconscious environmental and social analysis for the purpose of threat mitigation. Is this an accurate summary? It is, Liam said, his voice steady. He had decided on absolute honesty. There was no other path. The Pithran representative chittered, its translator lagging a half-second behind. Threats, threats. This one sees threats where there are none. This is paranoia, a malfunction. Unstable, Clark rumbled, his voice like rocks grinding together. Paranoia is seeing threats that do not exist. The human sees threats that could exist. There is a difference. It is the logic of a warrior. It is the logic of a predator, Kaelin interjected, her voice cutting through the debate. All eyes turned to her. But not one like any we know. A Clarg hunts for food or territory. A Vex hunts for sustenance or to prove their dominance. We act upon need. The human's instinct is not driven by immediate need. It is a constant state, a background hum. It is an evolutionary adaptation to an environment of persistent, unpredictable, intelligent threat. Elucidate, student Kaelin, Olin requested. You seem to have given this significant thought. Kaelin's gaze met Liam's across the table. There was no animosity there now, only a terrifying clarity. I have reviewed the humans' archival data. Their history is not a clean ascent. It is a chaotic, blood-soaked climb over the corpses of their own environment and more often than not each other. Their greatest predator has always been themselves. They have honed their minds for warfare against cunning, duplicitous, and unpredictable adversaries, other humans. We Vex hunt grazers. They are simple. Their patterns are predictable. Humans have spent millennia hunting the most dangerous prey in the known universe. A sapient mind with the same capacity for strategy and deception as their own. A hush fell over the room. Kaelin's analysis was brutal, but it resonated with a chilling truth. This is why he is so unsettling, she continued. When he profiles us, he is not seeing us as prey. That would be simple. He is seeing us as potential rivals, potential saboteurs, potential allies, potential liabilities. He is running a game theory simulation against every person in the room at all times because his species has learned, on a genetic level, that any other intelligent being is a potential player in the game of survival. It is not malice. It is a deeply ingrained survival protocol from a species that could never afford the luxury of simple trust. Zorl's feathery crest quivered, but they spoke, their voice gaining strength as they did. He told me of his former work, as a rescuer. This protocol, as Kaelin calls it, was used to save lives. It is a tool, and like any tool, its morality is defined by its use. Is a blade evil? Or is the hand that wields it? A blade that is always drawn is a threat regardless of intent. The Pithran chittered agitatedly. The core of the issue is not the tool itself. Olin's thought voice interceded calmly. It is the implications of its existence. We have operated under the assumption that advanced sapience leads to a reduction in primal survival instincts. That civilization is a process of sanding down the sharp edges of evolutionary history. Humanity presents a contrary data point. It suggests that for some species, sapience is not a replacement for those instincts, but a terrifying amplifier for them. Their minds did not evolve beyond the battlefield. They turned the entire universe into one. Liam felt a surge of defensiveness. That's not fair. We're not conquerors. We're explorers. We're here to learn to cooperate. Your intentions are not in question, student Liam Olin replied. Your nature is? Let us consider a hypothetical. A critical systems failure occurs in the academy. Power is failing. Life support is unstable. Panic ensues. The room went silent, each representative imagining the scenario from their own perspective. The Pthran would swarm, seeking collective safety, likely creating a fatal bottleneck, Olin stated dispassionately. The Grawl would attempt to apply brute force, perhaps compromising structural integrity. The Kylith would scatter, their instincts screaming for open spaces that do not exist. The Vex would act for their own survival, efficiently and ruthlessly. Coordinator Olin would analyze the data streams and attempt to find a logical solution from a control room. What would you do, student Liam? Liam didn't have to think. The plan was already there, springing forth fully formed from the background processes of his mind. I'd ignore the panic, he said, his voice taking on that flat, professional tone again. I'd confirm the nature of the failure at the nearest terminal. If it's a cascade, I'd prioritize breathable air and stable gravity. I'd use the emergency comms to create a clear channel, overriding the general panic. I'd identify the most stable section of the academy, likely the old Foundation pylons near the Geolab, and direct controllable groups there. I'd identify key personnel, engineers, medics, anyone with technical skills, and triage them, protecting them from the chaos so they can work. I would use Bohr's strength to clear debris. I would use Kalen's speed to carry messages or supplies. I would use Zorl's keen sight to spot structural weaknesses or secondary threats from a distance. I would sacrifice a damaged section of the academy to preserve the core. I would make hard choices. I would save as many people as I could, and I would do it without asking for permission. The silence in the room was absolute. He had just, without a moment's hesitation, taken command of a disaster that hadn't even happened. He had assessed his friends, the very people in this room, and assigned them roles based on his cold, efficient calculus. He had become the one thing no one expected. A leader. Bohr stared at him, not with fear but with a dawning awe. Kalen's yellow eyes held a new, potent gleam of respect. She was a predator who understood chain of command, who understood the necessity of a leader in a crisis. Zorl looked at him with a complex mixture of fear and profound gratitude. They had seen the monster, and then they had seen the savior, and they were beginning to understand that they were one and the same. And this, Olin's voice resonated with what might have been the crystalline equivalent of a sigh, is the conundrum of humanity. You are simultaneously the greatest potential threat and the greatest potential asset in any crisis. Your nature makes you a source of social instability, yet that same nature makes you supremely adapted to resolving instability. You are a paradox. The coordinator paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. The Nexus Academy was founded on the principle of peaceful coexistence. The revelation of your species, core psychology challenges this. But it does not have to break it. It requires a new protocol, one of understanding. We must learn to see your nature not as a flaw, but as a feature. A dangerous, powerful, and perhaps necessary feature in a galaxy that is not always as peaceful as we pretend it to be. Olin's attention focused on Liam once more. And you, student Liam, must learn that your protocols are not invisible. They are felt by those around you. Trust, for most species, is a gift. For you, it seems, it must be earned through constant demonstration of benign intent. You cannot simply be a friend. You must actively, consciously perform the role of a safe harbor. It is an unfair burden, but it is the burden your evolution has placed upon you. The meeting was over. No punishments were given, no restrictions imposed, but everything had changed. As they filed out of the room, the other species looked at Liam differently. The fear was still there, but it was now mingled with a grudging respect, a cautious curiosity. Kalen fell into step beside him. Your disaster plan, she said, her voice a low hiss. It was sound. You did not hesitate to assign me a high-risk role. You're the fastest, Liam replied simply. You had the best chance of success. "It is a logical assessment," she conceded. She paused, then added, "If such a crisis ever occurs, my skills are at your disposal." It was not an offer of friendship. It was the declaration of an alliance, a pact between two predators who understood that survival was the highest law. A moment later, Zorl came to his other side. They were trembling slightly, but they held their ground. "I would have been frightened," they chirped softly. "I would not have known what to do." "No," Liam said gently. "That's why I would have told you exactly where to go and what to look for. I wouldn't have let you get lost in the chaos." He was protecting them even in the hypothetical. He was running a threat assessment for them. The realization dawned on Zorl's face. His instinct wasn't just about self-preservation. It was fiercely, terrifyingly protective of those he had designated as his. His pack, his responsibility. They walked into the main concourse of the academy. The usual cacophony of sounds and sights washed over them. But for Liam, something was different. The burden of his secret was gone, replaced by the heavier burden of being known. He saw the whispers, the wide-eyed stares, the quick glances. He was no longer an anonymous student. He was the human. He felt the familiar urge to begin his sweep, to map the room, to update his internal matrix of threats and assets. The old software was running. But then he looked at Zorl on his left and Kalen on his right. One a friend he was learning to reassure, the other an ally he was learning to trust. He made a conscious choice. He relaxed his posture. He softened his gaze. He deliberately turned down the volume on the constant, vigilant hum in the back of his mind. It felt like stepping off a cliff. He felt exposed, vulnerable, slow. But he also felt lighter. The future of humanity in the galaxy was an unanswered question. They were a paradox, a species of loving, empathetic, artistic beings forged in a crucible of relentless, intelligent conflict. They were rescuers and killers, builders and destroyers all at once. The galaxy had wanted a new, interesting member to join its peaceful collective. Instead, it had found a creature that had stared into the abyss of its own nature and learned to weaponize the darkness to protect the light. Liam didn't know what would happen next. But as he walked through the heart of the Nexus Academy, flanked by a being of instinctual fear and a being of instinctual violence, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. It wasn't the cold confidence of a survivor who had all the angles covered. It was the tentative, fragile, and infinitely more powerful hope of someone who was, for the first time, not entirely alone. The murmurs would continue, but for now he had found his own small, strange peace in the heart of the storm.